Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Leadership Breakdown Podcast. I'm your host, Kylie Ota, and today we're going to take a deeper dive into understanding the cost of leadership breakdowns. And again, you know, we don't often realize how much our leadership style is actually costing us until you see the hard numbers. And again, right, this is the podcast where we just break through the fluff and all the stuff and really get to the heart of what it takes to lead with confidence, clarity, and power. And anyhow, have you ever felt like you're constantly busy but not really moving the needle forward? Like you're working a lot harder than you should, and but somehow that goal that you're working towards, it's not just adding up. And today we're actually going to put some real numbers behind what's actually happening. And we're going to refer to your leadership edge as we go through this process. Because whether you really realize it or not, the leadership leaks are costing you time, ideas, money, and energy, like we talked on the last episode. And in this episode, we're going to really break down the cost for each quadrant of the time wheel. And in some cases, some of my clients, it adds up to like thousands of dollars per year. Because we're talking about a compound effect, right? You have, say, X amount of hours per week spent on X amount of this, right? There's 52 weeks in a year. You do the math, it adds up to thousands of dollars. So we're going to get to all of that here. But first, we're going to dive deeper into each leadership edge because each leadership style has a strength and they have what I call the shadow side. And that's why I call it the edge, right? When you're on the edge, because it's a double-edged sword, right? You have your strength that can cut through things, but also the shadow side that can also cut you. So we have to be careful on how we manage that leadership edge. So here's a quick breakdown of those four different leadership styles and their strengths, right? You always want to start with strengths first, right? According to the sandwich methodology. So we're going to talk about the powerhouse. And if you're not familiar with my style, you can refer to the disc, which is the D type. And so this leadership style, right, the powerhouse, she's bold, decisive, very action oriented. And then you have the passionista, who is related to the I type. And this person lives in the ideas quadrant. The powerhouse lives in the money quadrant of the time wheel. And so the passionista, right, she's charismatic, she's creative, she's full of energy. Then you have the philanthropist, who is equivalent to the S type on the disc. And this person lives in the time quadrant. And right, this type is loyal, she's supportive, deeply relational, likes to, do a lot of team building and stuff. So that's this style. And last but not least, the perfectionist, which is related to the C type. And she lives in the energy quadrant. And again, we're going to break it all down for you later in this episode, how the quadrants relate to each personality style. Anyway, the perfectionist, right? Obviously, detail oriented, very methodical, and of course, high standards. But when we look at these strengths and they go unchecked, that's when we start to see the bleed in the time, ideas, money, and energy quadrants. So we're going to be breaking down each style now, starting with the powerhouse. And when we're talking about the powerhouse, the number one issue that they have, or their number one shadow that costs them the most, are the control issues. And so what this looks like, right? Micromanaging, trying to do everything themselves because they don't trust the team. And the cost that's associated with that, right? Say there's 10 hours a week you're spending as the powerhouse on tasks that, you know, just say your salary is $100, right? That's 10 hours a week that could have been delegated to someone who makes half as much as you, $50 an hour. So that's about $24,000 a year wasted, you know? So that's one strategy right there. And how we shift out of that is we learn how to delegate because, right, think of all that money that you could have recovered. And your time, especially as a leader, your time, you know, and money is worth so much more spending it on that innovative stuff, right? Delegating things to someone who, right, is probably better at you, better than you at it, and ch- developing that trust is really going to help you to actually save money in the long run. And you can focus on your high value leadership skills instead of like working on this execution piece because you're not getting paid to execute, you're getting paid to come up with the ideas. So that's that cost. The passionista, right, the I type, this this shadow is the we're going to quantify the loss of ideas due to lack of execution. So the Passionista's leadership leak is constantly jumping from idea to idea, but never finishing anything, right? You never cross the finish line on anything. So how we calculate the cost of unfinished ideas is, let's say you were thinking about putting in an offer and each offer is about $10,000. And you work on this project. So we're not even we're talking about like revenue loss by not getting it out there, right? You have a 10K product that could have been sold to maybe 20 people, right? That's thousands of dollars lost in revenue, but also we're not calculating the cost of how many man hours you spent like trying to get it off the ground, but you're like, and then when you pivot, all of those hours, time, money, energy spent on this project that's now sitting on the shelf collecting dust, that cost is not often calculated as well, right? When you scrap a project. So the shift that needs to happen here is you need to include micro milestones so that one, what happens often here is that you lose energy, right? You lose steam, you lose that dopamine hit. What you need to include are these micro milestones so you have micro celebrations along the way so you get that dopamine hit and it kind of propels you along so that it's not this far of a journey from start to finish. They're, like, yay, we got here. Oh, yay, we got to this next checkpoint. And that will help to get you actually to cross the finish line so you're not wasting all this time, money, and energy on unexecuted projects, right? It's only a deliverable if it's delivered. Am I right? Anyhow, the philanthropist, right? Again, this is the S type. She lives in the time quadrant. So time. This is the bucket where the philanthropist leaks the most. And it's spending too much time people pleasing in leadership. So what that looks like as a leadership leak is avoiding conflict, right? Overcommitting to other people's problems. That's what I call OPP, and prioritizing relationships over business decisions. So, how we actually calculate that cost of the loss. So, let's say you just spend 5 extra hours a week on unnecessary meetings, and in the cost calculator, we actually break it down. Like I have you actually look at your meeting schedule and see if these meetings are necessary. And it's usually with this client that I have the most resistance of getting rid of meetings. They're like, no, but how am I going to know what my team thinks? How am I going to know what they need if I don't have these meetings? And there are other ways that you can get that information without having these costly meetings. I'm going to tell you how costly they actually are. So just 5 extra hours a week on unnecessary meetings is costing you $24,000 a year, right? And then you also have indecisiveness, which slows down projects. And that's what happens a lot of times at these planning meetings. Like, why are we sitting down to decide something? Like, we should have all, like, that could have been in an email. How many times you heard that? That could have been in an email. We could have made the decision outside of this room. And that slows projects, causes delays, and it just adds to the cost of these decisions. So what that could look like to shift it is, one, set clear boundaries on, like, this is my responsibility, this is yours. Because a lot of times what happens is we enable our team, and if they're, not picking up the slack, who ends up picking it up? Me, you, right? And that's not what leadership looks like. And so the shift that has to happen as well is we have to empower others and help them reclaim their sovereignty and reclaim our leadership authority, right? And last but not least, of course, is the perfectionist, which again is the C type, and she lives in the energy quadrant. And this Achilles heel here is the analysis paralysis leadership leak. And we all know what that looks like: overthinking and delayed of decisions, waiting for the perfect condition to launch something, to execute on something. And again, if it doesn't cross the finish line, it's not a deliverable because it cannot be delivered. So, how do we calculate the cost of this, right? If you're holding off on a launch of a particular service that is worth maybe $5,000 a month, and you delay that for 6 months, right? That's $30,000 lost. And, constant revisions and the hesitation and, like, making everything perfect, perfect graphics, perfect proposals, perfect all the things, right? This is what kills the momentum, and it kills your visibility, and it also kills your leadership presence online, because that stop and start, like, your followers are like, oh, yeah, okay. All right. And you lose that momentum. So, what needs to happen, right, to shift out of that is you need to move from perfection to progress. And like I tell all of my clients who sit in this category, when they're not executing as they should be, I introduce the 80-20 rule. And it's really a clutch their pearls kind of moment when I'm like 80%. I'm like, 80 is still passing. I mean, literally a C is still passing, right? 70% is still passing. And how much more time, money, and energy could you recoup in that 20% that you're giving to these projects that actually don't need it? So what needs to shift is, right, you have to start, act fast, just iterate the idea, and, refine it along the way, because you're not going to be grabbing real data, right? If you're just postulating, like, no, get it out on the field and then refine as you go, because you're getting actual real data from the marketplace. And so, why does this even matter? Why am I harping so hard on this, right? Because I see a lot of leaders that think they're busy, but they don't realize how much money they're literally burning, right? If you saw a $30,000 hole in your bank account, right, would you fix it? Of course, you fix it immediately. But these leadership leaks, and that's why I've quantified it in the cost calculator, because the people that I was working with did not understand how much this was actually costing them. And until I quantified numbers, they were like, you mean I'm actually losing? Yeah, girl, you're losing money by staying stuck here. And they're like, oh my gosh. So, all that to say, right, the faster you fix these leaks is the faster you can scale, you can grow, and you can step into your next level of ease. So, let me ask you, now that you've seen the numbers, where do you see yourself in these patterns? And I get it, it's a mirror, it's hard, right? We're looking at ourselves and like, yeah. So, I'm going to challenge you today, after you're done listening to this episode, just reflect, one, on your personality type, and then two, looking at the examples and even going maybe a bit further, where are you leaking time, ideas, money, or energy? And honestly, if you're serious about shifting out of these leaks, we need to talk. And whether it's working with me one on one or just diving deeper into your own, leadership leaks and just understanding them, you have to be ready to be radically honest about what's holding you back. And that's why I created this. It's because this calculator is literally the mirror. Like the hard cost, like seeing those hard numbers is what actually makes you shift out of things faster because it's so expensive, right? It's way more expensive than hiring a coach like me, right? Staying stuck is costing you more than you realize. And if this episode hit home for you, I want you to share it with another leader who needs to hear this because, right? The mirror. It's easy when we're looking at ourselves in the mirror, but I would say it's easy when we're looking at this to recognize someone that we know that could use it. So again, forward this episode to her, but also how does it also apply to you, right? And if it's something that you want to go deeper on, you know where to find me. Uh, go to the show notes, click on the links below, kylieota.com. And until next time, keep leading boldly. And we're going to keep breaking down these leadership strategies one by one by one. And I'll see you guys again next time. Bye.